DJNTV and Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Now introducing the one and only Ben Stowe.
Yeah, baby! Yeah. Good evening and welcome to our show tonight on DJNTV. Tonight we're going to answer that question that's been burning in your heart for so long. We're going to answer why Obi-Wan did not tell Luke that Anakin was indeed Darth Vader.
Well, I mean, he did.
A minute later. It was like really late. I mean, there was those moments he should have said something earlier.
From a certain point of view.
There is that. So we'll get into that question a little bit later because
the bigger question is, where was R2 through all this?
Yeah, what's up with that?
Chewbacca couldn't have been like, hey man, that's your sister.
Yeah, somebody could have saved the day, but no. Questions, burning questions. We know you have them. If you do have questions, by the way, with our topic tonight of talking about subwoofers and speakers and cones and different things, you can put those into the chat and I'll be getting those. So yeah, be sure to subscribe. Oh, I like that. Subscribe tonight. So tonight we're going to be talking about subwoofers. This is an area in which there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of mysterious elements.
Yes, yeah. Alchemy and whatever.
Yes, magic and the Force, and sometimes not so much Force. So Ben, a lot of people, of course, are to that. They're just about ready to fire up for the wedding season, and some people have already started in that. And I've been just seeing a lot of people. How can I, for the upcoming season, take my speakers and bump them up? And usually the conversation comes back to subwoofers. So what I really want to start off with is our very first part of it, is that if I have a 2-speaker sound system and I want to add subwoofers, or I'm thinking about helping the sound, and somebody says, like me today in the chat room said, maybe you should be looking at adding subwoofers to your system. Mm-hmm. Why would a person want to go from having a 2-speaker sound system to a 4-speaker? What's the benefit of taking that jump and adding 2 subs to your system?
Well, assuming when you say 2-speaker versus 4-speaker, you're talking about a stereo left-right, top, and then a left-right sub. That's those are the 4 speakers you're talking about.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I guess in essence, if we have a 2-way top, we've now created a 3-way system, where we have, 2 elements in the top, and now we have our sub element. And as I like to say, there's no substitute for a subwoofer, It just, people say, well, I'll get a 15 instead of a 12. Yes, that's going to produce more low frequency out of that high frequency box. But even amongst 15-inch drivers, and maybe we'll look at this a little bit later, but there's a big difference in the driver and cabinet design between a full range top and a subwoofer. You're just simply going to get tones and low frequency extension out of a subwoofer you're not going to get out of a top box. So adding that subwoofer really fills in that bottom of the music. It gives you a lot of those lower audible tones, but it also takes a lot of pressure off your top box. It can focus more on the job that it's designed to do, so your system's going to be able to run more efficiently and louder too.
So multiple benefits to that. When it comes to but we're going to be pulling a lot more electricity, I would assume, from the wall when you add subs to the equation?
Well, you will be pulling more, yeah, but modern systems are so efficient, and I guess it depends on where you are and what kind of power is available, but rarely is that going to be, I think, a maximal concern. We're talking about worst case scenario for a really high powered wedding rig, maybe adding another circuit. And I know some of you might say, well, I don't get more than one circuit at my show. Okay, still adding a subwoofer, is going to allow the whole system to operate more efficiently. So yes, you might draw more power, but to me, I would find a way to get the power. That's just me.
We have a question already, and it's kind of in this same area. Somebody was wondering if there's a difference in the woofers. If we have our Evolve 50 type sub, which is a 12-inch sub in the Evolve 50, and if we would just be buying a 12-inch sub from their EKX 200 line, which is I think a 12-inch sub, are they asking those 2 subs to do different things? Let's just start there.
You kind of lost me a little bit. Are we saying, because the Evolve is a system that comes with the sub?
Correct,
so you
yes.
can't really get an Evolve without a sub.
Right. But is that sub that is in the Evolve, is it doing basically the same job as an external standalone sub would? Or is the Evolve 50 sub doing more, maybe having more frequencies than what a standalone 12-inch sub would.
Well, I think the way that question's phrased is somewhat confusing and maybe even a little misleading. But I mean, the short answer is, yeah, they're doing the same thing. But the long answer is maybe they're not, and I know that sounds like it's contradictory, and I realize it is. But the thing is, and we're going to talk about this a little bit when we get into subwoofers and purpose-built devices, obviously the Evolve is designed as a system, and there's always trade-offs. Engineering is a huge series of compromises. So, you have these compromises that were made for, low frequency extension and output and, all these things that go into choosing the driver and the cabinet, and then the tunings, the settings that go into that, and how it's going to interact, with the high frequency elements, because there are some trade-offs that have to be made here. Well, we can get louder at a cost of frequency response, or we can have better frequency response at a cost of volume. And at some point, all these compromises have to be made. But the short answer is basically the sub in the Evolve is doing the same thing as like an ELX, 12 sub would do in the simplest of terms.
But the magic of that is the tuning that they have done to match match the top. And even though in the back of the subs you can dial in, there's just something to have the exact right speaker above it and the exact right placement, because that can be kind of an issue too, if the replacement of where the sub is compared to where the top is.
Yeah, it's greater than the sum of all the parts, and I mean the quality of the driver is important, the quality of the box design and the overall design with the driver in mind, and we'll look at some various things that are relevant to drivers, like the EBP and the volume displacement and the resonant frequency, and we'll talk about some various things that go into selecting drivers, X max, X lim. But then then these tunings are the next level of magic, and at every level we've seen that, whether it's the Evolve or Touring line arrays. These factory tunings and these FIR filters and things that are enable this box to perform optimally are really game changing. Because that's where you make those decisions. That's where you say, well, I've got an 18-inch driver, which we'll look at some response charts here, and it'll produce these frequencies well above where I need them to go, and that's wasteful. So how do I get the most out of this driver? But at the same time, you'd say, well, I could push it a bit more at maybe 60 hertz or 70 hertz. But then I start losing what I could do, in terms of overall output, because at some point there are mechanical limits to the driver. So there's a lot of these compromises that go into this, and it's very, very complicated. And I don't want to make everybody tune out of the show right now. I can just say, well, it depends, but it is. There's a lot of, as we joked earlier about alchemy, there's a lot of science that goes into this. You don't just take a box and cut a hole in it and stick a driver in it and have great things happen.
So let's talk a little bit more about just the boxes. Nothing with the drivers or anything or any of these scientific. Are there different options there as far as do different companies use different things? Is everybody basically making a plywood box that's pretty much the same when it comes to subwoofers? Well,
here again, like there's two answers. In the simplest terms, we can say, yeah, pretty much everybody's doing the same thing, but really they're not. And even within families, you've got horn loaded and ported, and you've got all these different types of designs within subwoofer types. And as we'll look at some of the driver characteristics, there are different drivers that will perform better, and that's one of the things that like the EBP measures. But these drivers would perform better in different types of boxes. So even within a company or a family of loudspeakers, you might have different designs. It would be kind of like saying, well, do Ford and Chevy make the same cars? I mean, that's a broad generalization, right? Because, even within cars, there are different types of cars. And then you've got trucks, and you've got SUVs, and then you've got the El Camino, whatever the hell that was, but, just saying, So, yeah, I mean, certainly different companies have different philosophies. Danley kind of is a bit of an outlier. They make excellent stuff, amazing stuff, but they kind of operate in their own kind of world, and then you've got others that tend to have more mainstream products, and then you have some that are super specialized. L Acoustics, really has kind of a niche market, I think. So, it's a complicated question to answer deeply.
So I've been looking at different subwoofers, of course, as they're always seeing these things pop up. And of course, there are studio monitor subwoofers compared to, and I've seen
I have one next to me. Yeah.
And for somebody who's looking and saying, "Wow, I got this 12-inch studio monitor," and now we're talking about somebody who's probably coming out of the practicing in the apartment, and they're ready to go out and do a show, and they're like, this little 12-inch sub here that I've been using from has been awesome. I should take it out in the field. There are differences between things we use in our studio to what we would be using out on the road, and kind of give us a couple of little possible differences between the two.
I think the easiest way to say it, and I think I coined this phrase. So let's patent, copyright, trademark this.
The right rig for the gig.
Yeah, I might have stole that one, but
so that wasn't it. Okay, wait.
Well, it might be mine. I don't know if you can't find it.
Come to the dark side. We have cookies. No, that wasn't it. That wasn't it.
Definitely stole that one.
Yeah,
this one is there's no replacement for displacement. And really, there's a lot of factors in, the loudspeaker itself. And of course, we talked about the cabinet design, and, we'll focus more on transducers right now, which is the physical loudspeaker. But, you've got these things like, volume displacement, and X max, which is the amount of movement you can have before it, the voice coil leaves the magnetic gap. And then you've got X lim, when it has a mechanical limit, and all these things, there's all these factors, and I made some charts from a company that makes loudspeakers and just showed just 18s against each other. Even all 18s are not created equal, right? So I think that, one is most studio monitors are smaller drivers. Mine in my studio is a 10. And it sounds pretty good in here. And a lot of times you see 10s in bass cabinets, bass guitar cabinets, that sort of thing. 10 is not going to do well at all in the pro audio realm. It's going to struggle compared to an 18. And that is because of those compromises and those trade-offs. It's not going to be able to produce those low frequencies loudly. We're simply going to run out of gas, basically. It can't move enough air, and a bigger driver is going to move more air. And here's a simple way of thinking it, and then I'm going to tell you it's not simple. But two 12-inch drivers have roughly the same surface area as an 18-inch driver. So that is not to say that two 12-inch drivers are as good as an 18-inch driver. There would be a lot of compromises back and forth in terms of punch and SPL versus low frequency extension and blah, 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 blah. And we could just honestly follow this rabbit trail round and round and round, But the short version is that those studio monitor subwoofers were purpose built to live in small spaces like a studio, and there are different studio monitors, of course. Yeah. So the short answer is something that was built to exist in a car or something that was built to exist in a studio, while it might sound great there, is not going to perform at a venue. And honestly, this isn't one of those things you have to take my word for it. Go ahead and try it.
And let's flip that around the inverse, because I've seen numerous people when they were looking at buying a new sound system, they're like, "Hey, I want to get a sound system that I can use to DJ, and then I can use it for my in my living room." So I'm thinking
right for the gig. There it is.
Yeah, right. We've got the the inverse of that is that you've got speakers that are meant for a larger space that don't sound as intimate as you would like them to be.
We're talking about subwoofers, and specifically talking about when the new X12128 came out, and those ridiculous 16,000 watt drivers that are in them. There was a conversation of how that compared to the previous X-Line Advance X Sub. And it was sort of like, well, you were trading some musicality for brute force. It's still a great sounding sub. It's maybe not quite as musical, but it sure hits a whole lot harder. And so again, you sort of have to look at these compromises, and we've gotten really good at kind of having it all, but there are still compromises being made. The speakers that are being made today are in many ways so much better than the speakers you could have got 10 or 15 years ago because of our advances in the tunings and our understanding of cone design and, all these kinds of things. But still there are these compromises,
You were talking cone design. You've been talking about extruding limits and different things. Kind of give us, I think you can kind of show us an example of what those are, can't you?
Yeah, I got my, thank you for reminding me. I've got my my prop here. And there are a couple things. Tell me, can you see it okay?
Yep, we're wonderful.
This is my very dirty prop. I'm sorry, it really needs a good cleaning job. But anyway, this is, by the way, is functional because this voice coil is intact. And so what we can see here, and I'm looking at a monitor so I can see what you see. This is our voice coil, a winding of wire. And anybody who made a electromagnet with a nail and copper wire in kindergarten, you know how this works. And anyway, that didn't, I'm sorry, your childhood was terrible. But anyway, this is a permanent magnet here, ceramic or neodymium, and then this is a voice coil, which becomes our electromagnet, and the opposition of poles north-south causes this to move, right?
Yep.
All right, my speaker is moving, and that is pushing air, and that's what we talk about in terms of moving air, moving mass. By the way, you mentioned force earlier, and force equals mass times acceleration, so that actually does have a factor here. So force is a thing for loudspeakers.
Nice.
Just not the force.
Oh.
But what we're talking about with XMAX is you've got this magnetic gap, and how much can this speaker move in the magnetic gap? That's the measurement of XMAX. That's not the same as mechanical excursion. This speaker also has a physical limit for how far it can move before it either, basically wrecks itself, tears itself off the spider or the surround, or it slams into the bottom or whatever. So there are mechanical limits to this as well. So we have, the XMAX, then we have our thermal limits, and we have our mechanical limits, which are all limiting factors to what this loudspeaker can do. And then when we take a look at and there's a lot of things that go into this, the depth of the cone. So, what we could calculate surface area of a cone, right? But what is the volume displacement? And I'll show you a couple of different models of 18, and you'd say, well, they're all 18s. The volume displacement should be the same, right?
Right.
Wrong. Yeah, wrong. So, because of the design differences, but then there's also the materials that are being used, the magnets and the voice coil and the cone itself. And, really just what can this do? Because like you might say, well, why can I buy an EV ELX 200 or an EKX 18 or an ETX? What's the difference really? They're all 18s made by EV.
Yeah.
Why is one so much more expensive? And even on paper, specs can be really hard to interpret. You can look at this and say, well, that's only a 2 dB difference. Yeah, but 3 dB is the same as doubling the power. So 2 dB actually is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And we'll look at some charts here. I've got some fun stuff, and then we got some software. You can kind of model some stuff. Anyway, we can dive into all of that. I actually forgot the question. I talked myself right out of the question.
No, you answered it about a half hour ago, and now we're
good. Yeah, thank you.
So we have it answered and such, and now we're back to
if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, you just engineering,
dazzle with the other stuff. So you're talking about the cones, and there's a variation, especially when you're talking about the 18s. That not all 18s, even in the same from the same company, are reacting the same when it comes to the cones. Let's dig into that one a little bit more, because I think that for the average person, they're like, I've got an 18-inch cone from XYZ, or an 18-inch woofer from XYZ, and I should be able to handle and be awesome.
Well, let's take a look. So these are all models from a company by the name of Eminence, which basically makes loudspeakers. That's all they do is make transducers. And I went with them for two reasons. One, they're a great company, it makes a good product. But two, and by the way, they were the ones who were nice enough to make that cutaway for me about 100 years ago. Two, they publish all this data because they don't sell enclosures, they only sell loudspeakers. So people are building their own enclosures, and that's who's buying Eminence loudspeakers. So thanks to them for providing all this information. So what we can see across 4 different family lines, all low frequency drivers, is we've got these various columns here. We've got, of course, the size; they're all 18 inches, and then we've got our displacement. Our volume displacement over here in VD, but then our surface area over here. Then we've got our resonant frequency, and in a simple way, we might say that a lower resonant frequency is better for a subwoofer. Higher resonant frequency might work better for a mid-range driver or high frequency, but it's notable that the tour grade speaker, which is the bottom column, actually has a higher resonant frequency. So you'd say, well, then it's not better. No, because remember, we got all these other things to look at, and it's complicated. So then we've got our EVP value, which we talked about, and
what is that again? Give us what those abbreviations are.
That's okay. Let me hang on here. Let me try to find another example for you that maybe we can. Oh, shoot! Come on, PowerPoint. There we go. All right. Let's do this. So, try this. I got a handy little chart that I stole. Okay. So EBP shows us the difference between the efficiency and the bandwidth, and you can see that it's a relationship of the resonant frequency and the QES. But I was talking about earlier how less than 50, they would say, well, you should use this in a sealed box, which we really don't see in pro audio.
Not too much, yeah. Not. There were for moments a couple of companies tried it, but then that was gone.
Yeah, so this is when we're getting into things like your studio monitors or home stereo and that sort of thing. And, it's not that you couldn't, but, generally to get the kind of output we're looking for in a pro audio world, we're using something like a ported, or horn loaded or something. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so here you can see, where they're saying, depending on these EBP values, this is just one factor, but how you might use this in a loudspeaker.
Okay.
So let's jump back. Let me see if I got any other good stuff to show you before we jump back to that. Because you're right, I did kind of jump I got ahead of us here. I sort of threw all these values out and then didn't tell anybody what they are, right? So that wasn't very nice of me. I'm sorry about that. All right, see if I can get back here. Got two computers going, so I got a modeling software we're going to play with later. So, All right, we're back, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then, so there we've got our EBP, which we just talked about. And here we can see, and you can see the significant difference, by the way. This 118 and sort of row 2 was really not, it was sort of an all-purpose 18 as opposed to a low-frequency design. And it really shows here. You can really see the difference, I think, in a lot of ways. But anyway, you can see the top line has a 3-inch voice coil. The others all have 4-inch voice coils. Sensitivity, this is measured at 1 watt at 1 meter. Basically how much sound do I get out of it for the power I get in it.
Sure.
And one thing we'll find, by the way, which is pretty interesting, is if all things are equal, meaning, if you have the same voice coil and the same magnet, you have basically the same motor structure, simply by making the cone bigger, the speaker is going to get more efficient. Now, these are all 18, so that's null here. But we'll look at that again in a second. And, I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing for people to know, that, using the same motor and changing the cone size is going to yield an increase in efficiency. And it's another reason that, those bigger drivers can be better up to a point. And then we get into this whole other trade-off where at some point the transient response begins to become affected because it can't move the cone fast enough, So we lose some of the punch, like from a kick drum or something, And there are trade-offs between like an 18 and a 21, between do we really want some of these subsonic things, because the 21 almost certainly is going to have more low-frequency extension, but it might lack the transient response that is desirable, So anyway, all right, so then we get over here to our volume displacement, and we can see the significant difference. These are all 18s, but look at this. This bottom one has nearly double the volume displacement of the top one.
Yeah.
And these are in order of cost, too, by the way. So least expensive down to the most expensive. And we can see also, we talked about the X-Max. The top 3 are in the 8.5 to 10 millimeter, and the bottom one goes to a whopping 15.2. So, moral of the story, it can move more volume further distances at higher power. So, you can see it has 1 dB difference in sensitivity from this one, but it has twice the power handling, which is going to yield 3 dB more output, and it's moving twice as much volume over a travel distance of nearly twice in the X-Max. In other words, that thing's a monster, and that's where the rubber hits the road. Something else I want to point out down here in the bottom is I took charts from 3 of them, and I don't remember which 3. I remember the 2 right ones are the bottom 2, and I think the far left one is the top one. Maybe not. But anyway, one of the things you'll notice is the charts are different sizes, and I did that on purpose because okay, good. There it is. It showed up. this is where the 100 dB line would be. So these charts are actually, so if I scaled them to the same height, that wouldn't be accurate because these charts go 5 dB more, which is pretty significant. The faint line you see in the background, by the way, is an impedance plot. So that's our impedance to the, presented to the amplifier. But anyway, we could see here the difference in the frequency response. And what's notable, though, is we're not using these things for any of that, right? We're going to use this for subwoofers. It's going to live in here, you know? Mm-hmm. And what you can see, again, looking at these two on the left and looking at this one on the right, look how much, we're still at 80 dB at 20 hertz.
And the human hear, how low can a typical person hear?
Well, they say 20 to 20 is the audible range, but those subsonic frequencies, and if you've got program material that lives down there, it makes a really big difference. And we'll look at an example here of an 18 and a 15 from the same family in an enclosure with all the EQ filters and everything applied, and you'll see that the 18 just simply digs lower, and that matters. That means the 15 is maybe punchier, but the 18 is going to outdig it, and you're going to have frequency response and LF extension that you just don't have elsewhere. So anyway, we can see that massive difference on that bottom driver as a result of those things. Mm-hmm. Just for fun, I think it's I can't remember where I just threw this together today, so I don't really know this PowerPoint because I just made it. So here we can see from the Eminence Kappa line, they're 10, they're 12, they're 15, and they're 18. And we can see just what I was talking about with that sensitivity, that the bigger the driver, the more sensitive it is. A substantial difference between the 18 and the 10, in fact. Yeah. But we can also see, we talked about, the surface area, 212s is roughly the same size as an 18. Mm-hmm. And here we can see those EBP numbers, a pretty significant number when we get to the 18. And of course, kind of what we would expect, this really plays right along with our resonant frequency, 39, 37, 35, 32. Well, that's exactly what we would expect. The driver's getting bigger, the resonant frequency's getting lower. Yeah. So everything, is just playing right along. It's giving us nice science. Volume displacement, we can see here pretty much as we would expect. The outlier here is the 12, again, is not an LF model. They don't have a 12 Kappa LF, but they do have a 10, 15, and 18 LF. Okay. Why they don't have a 12 LF, I don't know. But, I think it's represented in the X-Max. You go, oh, that thing does not have as much travel. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they don't intend for it to be used for these, really long travels for low frequencies. And then again, we could look at our charts on the bottom. And
so then again, that 12 would probably be something that would be more apt to be used in a top cabinet, horn load top cabinet type of situation.
100%.
Okay.
Yep, 100%.
Makes sense.
And not that you couldn't use it in a sub, but you can see that it is not built as a LF driver. So I think the moral of the story here is when you take something like the ELX 200 series, they have a 12 sub and they have a 12 top. Now, without looking, I'd be willing to bet $5 it's a different driver in the sub versus the top. Mm-hmm. Even if it wasn't, simply different cabinet design and different tunings would create a different result. But I'd be willing to bet it's a different driver.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. So, all right. So there is some of that. I'm actually going to look now because I want to know if I just lost $5. We should have don't you like talk shows and stuff, have people to sort of check stuff as you're going on,
Well, I'm watching the chat room and Res Dog Jourdain.
Oh yeah, my guy. Yeah, he's in back college radio together. My guy.
Yeah, he's in the room tonight, so I want to give a shout out there.
Thanks for joining us, Res Dog. I appreciate it. Hey, we were actually texting right before the show, so he's the man.
Yeah, we got a good crowd in tonight, so thank you guys for being with us this evening here.
Everybody wants a headache tonight.
Somebody was asking about 10-inch sub compared to a 12, and our last graphic will answer that. The two 10s are just a little bit. They're a little surface area a little bit larger than a 12. They fall somewhere between a 12 and a 15. They're not as large as they don't have as much surface area as a 15, but they have a little bit more surface area than a 12. So
yeah, we could throw that graphic back up if need be.
Yeah, I think we're good with that. Okay, so what do you have?
All right. They are different drivers. So good. I didn't lose my $5. So Res Dog is probably going to be the one to come collect it. So he's local to me. He lives in my town. So
nice.
We're very, very nearby. So, my general neighborhood. Anyway, yeah. So it's an EVS 12L in the sub, and it's an EVS 12M in the two-way box. So what do you know? So do you want to see some super top secret confidential stuff that I can't tell you where I got?
Those are always fun.
I thought so.
Now, for those of you who are wondering, the Bothan spies will be stealing this information, and they will be taking it to... Oh, no. This isn't that part of the show.
Show some respect, John. Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Oh, man. Sorry.
You know, by the way, it's 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. How's that make you feel? Speaking of Bothans.
I was too young to watch any of those shows when they came out. I wasn't in the movie theater having popcorn and those licorice gumdroppy things, you know. I wasn't having.
Yeah, you were probably in high school. Ooh, shots fired.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I think you're only...
And our next question will be, where do babies come from?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because I was going to say that at the beginning when you said, you've all been wondering, and I'm like, where babies come from? All right, so, we'll talk about where loudspeakers come from.
There we go. That sounds good.
It's a safer topic.
What am I looking at here now?
All right, so what you have here is the top secret raw measured data of proprietary drivers. I cannot say which or from who, but what you can see is the raw response of a 15 versus an 18. Now, this means this is what the driver produces before it's put in a box and before it's, tuned and all these kinds of things, right? And we can see that for the most part, the 18 outperforms the 15, kind of across the board. But we can see there's a couple spots, like right here, where the 15 edges out the 18. And then, of course, it goes much higher, granted at a much lower frequency than the rest of where the, kind of the frequency response is at. But we can see the big glaring differences, right? And what we can see, and this is really big, is look at this. Look at that monster difference, particularly as we start getting, of course, across all of the areas where we would use a subwoofer, the 18 is more efficient and more powerful than the 15. But you can see that really start to happen as, we get down to the low frequency extension. That 15 is just not able to cut it, It's just not going to do it. Now, it's important because, as we saw before with those eminence drivers, if we measured those, from different families and things, we would see really meaningful differences. These are two drivers from the same company, from the same family. So other than the size of the driver, they're really pretty close. Okay. Now let's apply some box tuning. I believe I need to turn off my annotation to do that. Still can't. There we go. And now we can see with the EQ and processing applied the difference. And we can see that, sure enough, the 18 absolutely is outpounding the 15. We can see the 15 does get a little bit, higher frequency, no surprise. But again, we see that gap fairly consistent here, but then we see that gap really start to widen below 30 hertz, And there you can see that big difference in that low frequency extension. That's where that 18 is just going to win, bring home the bacon, so to speak. Now, that doesn't mean it's the better driver or the better box for you. Because
sure.
18 is going to be bigger, heavier, and a little more expensive. So, 15 is going to be very punchy. It's going to be lighter. It's going to sound great. 15-inch subs sound great. But this is the difference, right? So then you might say, well, what about two 15s versus an 18?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. What happens if ice cream has drizzles on top?
It's better, I think.
See, that could be the answer to your question too. So let's see.
I had ice cream today. I was like, all right, enough's enough. I need to have some ice cream. Well, here we can see two 15s summed together, and of course we get 6 dB from the summation. So we can get into that in a minute. But we can see that this 215s now definitely are louder by a magnitude of just about 6 dB, maybe about a 5 dB difference here. They are louder than the 18. Mm-hmm. So you say, well, 215s is better than 118. Well, maybe. It's louder, but you've had to bring in more stuff too. And the 18 still wins once you start getting in these low frequencies, and here that 2 dB is pretty meaningful if you're doing some stuff that has a lot of program material down there. So in other words, the answer is, ready for this? It depends. So
it wasn't caramel.
Well, caramel's great. I love caramel. Butterscotch, whatever. I don't care. More sugar on my sugar? Absolutely. Yes, please. I read an article the other day. Did I share this with you? Yes, you did.
Yes, Warren Buffett. You're like, I'm going to be able to be. Yeah.
That's right. Warren Buffett is my spirit animal, not because he's rich, because I'm not, but because he did this in the most scientific way possible. He looked at the actuarial charts and he said 6-year-olds have the lowest mortality rate, so he's going to eat like a 6-year-old.
Yeah, Pop-Tarts and Peeps.
It's working for him. Look, Charlie Munger's 99 and Warren Buffett's 92, 93. So you know what? I'm going to have my ice cream with caramel and drizzles, and I'm not even sorry.
And sticking the marshmallows on your fingers and then eat them.
Absolutely.
That's the best way to do it.
Duh, everybody knows that. So if I die young, you all can stand over my grave and say, I told you so. But you know what? I will have died happy. So
sugar pie.
So do you want to see what happens when we move speakers around a little bit?
Let's before we get there, so let's just kind of recap what we've gone through so far. So pretty much consistently if we're looking at a 15 to an 18, that the 18 is going to be able to produce our lower frequencies where that's more, we may be able to hear, but it's really that feel.
Assuming all other things being equal. Mm-hmm. Again, if we look at, I don't know in terms of frequency response, but I would be willing to bet that in every way, an ETX 15 SP sub is going to lay waste to an ELX 118 or ELX 18 SP sub.
Right. But if we're staying in the same line.
Yeah, all other things being equal, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean, though. We have to be so careful, and that's why I wanted to show those comparisons to say that even two 18s aren't the same. But yes, all other things being equal, the 18 is going to hit harder and dig lower.
But as we've been talking about, there are trade-offs. That 15 is going to be easier to move, and I can literally, that's one of the changes I made in my personal sound system. Is I went from the 18-inch subs, which I'm running the EKX, and that's not a bad sub to move.
Oh, I love the EKX.
But the 15 inches is much easier to move.
It is, and it's so light. You can, honestly, I'm not a big, strong guy, but I can pick up a EKX 15 sub in one hand like a suitcase style. I think the EKX is one of the best value propositions on the market. It's got enough power and enough punch, but it's very affordable. And I'm not saying this is an endorsement for EV. I own a bunch of EKX. I'm really pleased with what you get out of that line. Bang for the buck. And
there's many speaker companies have a variety of different subwoofers in a family. So take EV out of the name EV out and put your favorite speakers in that have
exactly.
An 18 and a 15 in the same family. So it's applicable information. It's just that many who watch our shows regularly are very familiar with EV, as both Ben and I are.
Well, EV is, in the portable loudspeaker category, I think they're probably number one. They're number one and number two worldwide. They are one of the most dominant brands. So I think that's good enough. People would hear about them for sure, and of course, for you and I, fortunate enough to live in Minnesota, get to go to their engineering headquarters and see the things they do and how loudspeakers are born. And, not like babies, but, loudspeakers. But, I think that's why we use EV as an example. That being said, I love Danley, and there's a lot of brands I love RCF, but everybody's got good and bad. Everybody's got pros and cons. And, I don't really like being typecast. People are like, well, Ben's an EV guy. I don't know what that means, but do I like EV? Yeah, I do. Does that mean that I only like EV? No.
Let's go a different direction. Somebody brought up the question about replacing the cone or the woofer in a sub. And they were talking about that online. Some people have talked about putting an upgraded woofer of some sort of a brand, B and C. I have no idea what that is, but I'm guessing it's a brand of woofer. And they put those into an ETX cabinet, and they have had really good results with it. But let's talk about why the specific cone that in this case EV, but any company. I mean, they're not just grabbing something off the wall and throwing it in there.
No, that's something. I'm glad this person had good results, but I would put a cautionary tale out there and say, don't do that. There's a lot of reasons why, and we saw them basically when we started looking at the loudspeaker design specifics. The box itself is built with the transducer in mind, and in some cases, the transducer is built with the box in mind. Many times when a loudspeaker is in the design stages, they're building both. They're not taking an off-the-shelf driver. They're working towards an end design, and they're coming at it from two sides, saying, well, here's the box design and here's the transducer design. And many tests and many evolutions of that are going to undergo. I've seen this firsthand myself a few times. But even if they are taking an off-the-shelf driver, they're building the box with all of those settings, all of those parameters in mind, so that the box brings out the optimal performance of that transducer. But then they're also building all these tunings around that transducer specifically. And to say it simply, you're sort of playing roulette with putting another driver in there, and chances are you will lose.
Sure.
I mean, chances are it just won't be as good. So again, I'm not arguing with this person's experience or that they're happy with it. But, it would be really interesting to measure it. And they might say, well, I like it because now it does this better than the other driver did. But we've lost all these other things. Because through that design process, those compromises were made where they said, well, we can have louder, or we can have more LF extension, or we can have this, or we can have that. And they've made decisions about what they would have. And all of that's gone into the settings and the box and the tunings. And when you put a different driver in there, you're sort of compromising all of that. So it'd be very interesting to see. Maybe it would be better. Maybe it would be better for you and not better for somebody else because it wouldn't perform, to spec. But as a general rule, don't do that. Don't do that. It rarely works as well for all those reasons.
But there's that once in a that you do get lucky and things happen. But most of the time,
again, I'm not telling the person who did it that they were wrong. I mean, I guess I am. But if they're happy with the results, then they're not, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying I feel like they probably got very lucky, maybe.
No, and that makes sense.
Because it doesn't really matter, even if the driver is a better driver. That doesn't really matter,
Yeah, if it's not designed or geared or even programmed to utilize the capabilities of that, it's like having a gold-plated, heat-inducing ice cream scoop, and then having Neapolitan.
I am certain I see this all the time in riders, and I'm certain I just saw this in a rider where a band actually said, do not do that.
You cannot use gear with the replacement parts.
No, they said, we will not use it. And, no homegrown stuff, basically.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, gosh. Let's see if I can find that rider quickly.
And I got another subwoofer question here that popped up here, Ben.
Yeah, of course not when I'm looking for it quickly, and then I have to read the whole rider. And
yeah, we're good.
I see it in riders all the time, and I'll kind of, but it's where they're like, we will not play the show. We will walk.
Yeah, I can imagine. Somebody was asking about dual sub boxes, which this.
Oh, I know where it's at. I just remembered where it's at. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Dual sub box compared to two separate. So if I had a company that was making a EKX dual 15-inch sub compared to having a single 15-inch subs, which I would stack two of them on top of each other, would you think there's a noticeable difference between the two, or is it just I'm accomplishing the same thing using different methods of boxes?
I'm gonna have to have you ask the question again. I was looking for that rider still. All right. Anyway.
Okay.
Moral of the story.
If there was, okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, moral of the story, the engineers for these tours, they know that that box is not going to perform right. So they're like, do not reload your boxes with anything but what was designed to go in it, or we will not play your show. So
good lesson. So the dual sub. This was a thing when we first started back in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, that dual subs were the thing to have. I don't know many companies if they're still selling dual subs. I'm sure some are, but let's just.
Rare. I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah, let's just say that there was an EKX dual 15-inch sub. If we had that, and then we had two 15-inch, or 15-inch SPs, and we were just stack the two on top, so they basically looked like they were the same. Do you think there would be a harmonic difference or a difference in sound in any way, shape, or form between those two?
Negligible at best. We would expect that, probably they would use the same amp module because the drop in impedance would allow them to power both the drivers from one. Maybe not. They might do some slightly different tunings for a double box because it's always going to be used as a double box, whereas the single box could be used in a cardioid mode or something. But in terms of generally speaking, no, it's going to be pretty much the same.
Okay, so let's see. We were going to be looking at placement.
Yeah, so I've got some slides, and then I've got a software.
We've only got about 5 minutes if we want to be nice. We've got 10 minutes if we want to push it right to the edge.
Well, that's why I was trying to get to it.
Sorry.
I'm excited about. No, you're good. I'm excited about the nerdery. So, all right. So what we've got here, these are from a software called Ease. And these are overhead views. The darker the pink, the lower the volume, and the whiter the white, the higher the volume, in the simplest of terms. So we can basically see it's getting louder and quieter. And this is a single 18-inch subwoofer in a 100 by 100 square room. And what we're going to see here is a 6 dB gain. If I put another subwoofer right next to it, identical subwoofer powered the same right next to it. So just what you were talking about with the double versus, whatever. We're going to see a really big increase in output. Just boom.
And that's side by side, not stacked. Or would that
doesn't
be stacked?
matter.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Good to know.
In the case of two speakers, it doesn't matter. Now it does start to matter if we had like 8 or 10, because we would start to shape a pattern. And I think we did a show on that.
We did.
Talked about laying edges and arrays. The wider the pattern, the wider the stack, the narrower the pattern. But in this case, two subs does not matter.
Okay.
So on top, side by side, doesn't matter. So what we're going to do, and we're going to replicate this in the modeling software here in a second, but if I move these 5 feet apart, we can see what's happening. We're already beginning to make some beam steering here.
Sure.
We've got some cancellation off to the sides, and we've sort of pushed all that energy down the middle, and maybe we wanted to do that, and maybe we didn't, right? But and then if we move them 10 feet apart, we can see this. And we start to get kind of a weird Rorschach thing if we move them to 30 feet. So let's take a look at this in the live realm, and we can play around with this a little bit. I'm going to share this.
And that type of a change of, as you spread them apart, it doesn't matter if it's an 18 or 15 or 12, you're going to have a similar situation happening.
Well, it's important to note, I don't know if I said this, but that was at 100 hertz. So let's take a look at this, actually.
Okay.
I'm trying to annotate on the wrong computer. Haha, funny guy. You can see that I basically told this modeling software, I'm only interested in 100 hertz.
Okay, one.
Yep, which would be really rare. I'm doing this mostly for science, right? And so we can see here's my two subwoofers here. They are side by side. I zoomed in nice and close, and we're going to zoom out so we can see our pattern. So there's my two subs
on the floor, and we're gonna go up to the ceiling so we can drop a cupcake in a moment.
Exactly. We're going to zoom out. What I want to show you, though, is that I have them spaced 3.25 feet apart, but you can see that actually is zero spacing. So
3.25, would that be where the separation of the cones?
Yes, acoustic centers.
Thank you.
So that's why the numbers aren't going to be what I say they are. So when I say 10, it's going to be 13.25.
Makes sense, yep. we're good.
Okay, so here we go. Now, I don't know what this is going on here. I don't know. There's some weird anomaly in the
I'm
modeling
guessing this is because of them, having the Punisher into the next, the Daredevil that's going to be coming out here shortly. It's got to be a Punisher reference.
It was either that or I had some pillars or something in the modeling program that I forgot about.
Oh, yeah, or that too. Yeah,
I spent very little time preparing this.
No, this is still good.
So let's do this. Let's move these to 8.25. So it's actually 5 feet apart, and we can see immediately what happens. And now let's move into. It's exactly what we saw in the other program, except now we're also seeing more from the rear. The other drawing really chopped it off here, right? So let's go to 13, and we can see that, new kind of Rorschach-y pattern showing up. But what I think I want to do now, just for the sake of fun, is let's change this frequency to 50. And I didn't change my spacing, but my response changed a lot. Didn't it? So...
And this is at roughly 10 feet apart. So we're in a very tight setup. This could be where you're at, but most DJs would probably have it a little bit farther apart than that even.
Yeah, but and I guess what to point out is that when we change that frequency, we're changing the wavelength, and thus we're changing the relationship, the constructive and deconstructive interference. So, and as we can see, why don't you pick a number, John? So
let's put them about. So let's go 18 feet roughly. That'd be about if you go 18.25, that'll put about 15 feet.
Okay, 18.25, got it. So.
Yeah, that'll give it about 15 feet. I think that's kind of a nice, what typically we do. Now we're at hertz. Where are we at? Our hertz is at the bottom there. So we're at 100 hertz yet. Okay.
Now, if you said, well, I want to see the whole subwoofer range, so I want to go 30 to 100. Okay, well, there you go. It's going to be a little bit different at different frequencies within that, right? But, and that's why I try to isolate it to a single frequency, because then you can really begin to see, what's happening, at these different frequencies and how that response varies by wavelength.
And how big is that room?
This room, I believe, is 100 by 100. Yes, 100 by 100 room.
So very, very much could be a common reception or venue hall. And you look at those dark areas. I mean, those are dead zones, aren't they? Yeah,
they're very dead. And now one thing that's important to note here is, let's see. If we, oops, I went in the wrong one. We're set up in the middle of the room right now to illustrate that. So if we moved against the wall, that's going to look different. Now, what's important here, because somebody asked me this question the other day, they said, well, how far away from the wall should I be? And I said, it depends. So, but anyway, I don't have the wall being factored here. So
sure.
The wall is acoustically invisible to this program right now. So that's why we're not seeing any reflections from the wall or any impact of the wall. So we might as well be in the middle of the room,
And there's many times where I might be set up 10 to 15 feet from the wall. That has happened at many venues, and or high schools specifically, that I can't get a wall because there's a stage behind me or something weird. And you have that strong bass pipe or channel to the back.
Yeah, there is something weird here. I don't know. I don't see it. But there is definitely something weird that was showing up there. Maybe it's gone now. Maybe it's just some anomalous thing in the program. I don't know. But yeah, our weird shapes are gone now, so that's good. Let's put those back on the floor. All right. Yeah, that was weird. We're not seeing them anymore. So.
Yeah.
So sometimes the modeling programs, they're back. Yeah, it's a weird geometry. I think it's got to be just kind of something weird. Yeah, that is weird. So,
but I think the point is definitely there that as you're moving your speaker placement and as you change that, it can change the bass coverage of the space dramatically.
Yeah, exactly. Just disregard the weird little diamonds that are showing up in space, because there is you can see it's a repetitive pattern here.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something funky going on. And I was goofing around in this earlier, so there's a good chance that I did something that made it angry. If we did some resets here, it would probably just be fine.
Truly, in most cases, specifically if we're doing like a wedding, we would really be the most benefited by, in essence, stacking our two subs or putting your two subs together in the middle.
Well, yeah, you're going to get the most, you're going to get that summation. You can see right there, immediately, the difference, So you can see how much of a difference that made.
Yeah.
It's also much more even coverage. Again, never mind the little weird,
Yeah, our little diamondy things there. Well, that's good.
Because we're gaining total summation, so.
Mm-hmm. So Ben, our time is up. Okay. So to summarize, which sub is the best one? What size sub is the best for your application? They're trade-offs.
Yeah, it depends.
It really depends, and I mean, and this could be this could be a conversation if somebody's really, should I go A or B? This size or this size? A conversation with someone like yourself who has been there, done that, used those, and used that. You'd be able to help.
A lot of different subs.
Yeah.
And I know money doesn't grow on trees. I know, you can't go buy everything. I mean, Lord knows I've tried, but but sometimes it just doesn't make sense to take, the wrong rig to the gig, you know? So sometimes you have to if you want to do a variety of different things, you might need a variety of gear. True.
Yeah. Mickey. Yeah. We've talked about that numerous times, that right rig for the gig. That's how important that is, especially as people are looking about, adding some beef to their sound system for the summer in looking at fall school dances.
Yep.
Yeah. If you've got questions and thoughts like that, reach out to Ben and run some things past him, and he'll get you where you need to go. So, excellent, Ben. Thank you very much for putting some stuff together for us and some interesting little graphics and such. So, wonderful, and thank you guys for being with us tonight. If you want to head out the Tuesday night music show with Brian and Jay and John and Howie, that is coming up next at DJNTV.com, DJNTV.com/chill. And that link, you'll find that just gone up ahead of me saying this because, there's a delay. So you guys can pop out there in about 3 minutes. They're going to be going into that. It's a Zoom room. They'll be recording the music show. And then after that, you guys can kind of hang out and chat and have some fun tonight. So we'll see you guys. We will not be on next week as a typical show. We might be doing something, but it wouldn't be a typical show next Tuesday night, and then we'll be back after that because next week is the Lighting Symposium down in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So we'll catch you guys.
Audio Symposium.
And audio symposium. Yeah, it's a big.
This is good. This is good prep. This is good to get me in that.
Get you in that state of. That'll be great, and maybe we can sit there and ask questions. It'll be so much fun. All right, everybody, have yourself a good evening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye bye.